It's good for Cadillac to have finally gotten into the compact luxury crossover market. Something like their mid-size XT5 has been doing pretty well for the company, but people do like smaller vehicles. Our spotlight is on this 2019 Cadillac XT4 Sport. This is the top trim here in Canada, and the Sport adds things like the 18-inch 10-spoke rims, gloss black trim around the windows, leatherette dashboard, carbon fiber inserts for the trim, and a sport steering wheel. Now, the only engine on this is a 2-liter turbocharged inline-4, producing 237 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. So we're going to do a little exercise, all of us here together. First, we're going to breathe in and breathe out. We're going to get all of that stuff out that we've been going over with BMW, because this is not a BMW X3 competitor. Now, I've seen some people say it's an X1 competitor, but I think this actually slots in a little bit better with something like the Infiniti QX50 and even the Lexus NX300. So let's forget about the X4 that we filmed last week and focus more on the Cadillac XT4 and what it has to offer for buyers in this segment. Well, I hope everybody liked the breathing exercise we did there, because I really do feel that this doesn't compete even with something like the BMW X4 M40i that we featured before. It's mostly based on the engine. 237 horsepower is on the lower end of things, considering almost every luxury manufacturer offers a second or third option for engine, so you have more power. It's not slow. I mean, it is still a decent vehicle, certainly quicker than most of the consumer segment vehicles, but it is something to note. But I want to talk a little bit about pricing here and why I think it's important for buyers. Base MSRP for the all-wheel drive sport model is $42,795 Canuck bucks. It's a lot of money, but then you have to add a lot of options, and there's a lot of options, in fact, a lot of packages and options on this. I'm not going to go through each one individually, but suffice it to say, this is about as pretty loaded as you can get. $16,310 worth of options to bring the total MSRP as tested for this vehicle to $59,105 Canadian. Now, why is that important? A lot of people in our comments complain about panoramic sunroofs or sunroofs in general. Some people just don't like them. With the XT4, it is an option no matter what trim you go on. So with some vehicles, once you get to a specific trim, it's added automatically, and some people just don't like that. So with this, you can have the exact same car we have here without the pano sunroof. So that might be good for some people. Plus, you can configure the car the exact way that you want, so you can get essentially every feature you want and none that you don't. So this is about as fully loaded as you can get. And I did mention the sport models get 10-spoke rims. This actually has 20-inch double 5-spoke rims, just they've optioned a little differently here, so the look is slightly different. But I do like the look of it. Front has LED headlights. They're the similar type of headlights that we've seen from Cadillac. Their design is quite nice. They do have quartering lamps, but no LED fog lights. Cadillac has kind of moved away from fog lights in general. And you have all the safety tech you'd expect. Blind spot monitoring, lane keep assist, forward and rear collision, and active cruise control with stop and go. So there's a lot of safety tech. We kind of expect that from a luxury-oriented vehicle at this point, considering a lot of consumer vehicles offer that anyway, so makes sense. But there's some interesting stuff going around on the back. So let's go around there, and then we'll hop inside and talk about the interior. Now, one of the styling cues I do like back here quite a lot are the Altezza-style taillights. We actually haven't seen this on a modern car in quite some time. I can't think of the last vehicle that's come out, especially none of them that we featured, that have the clear lights back here. I think it's cool. I don't know if they've specifically gone back and looked at the original Lexus IS and Cadillac said, oh boy, yeah, we're going to do that. But I do like it. It gives this sport model a very unique look, especially as you're driving along. I really dig it. The back end here has some features. You do have the camera actually nestled up in the top for your rear view camera system. Not the backup camera, the rear view camera, which we see on Cadillacs. There's a nozzle jet to be able to wash it off, but so far, based on where the positioning is of it, just off of the actual back glass here, I haven't had to clean it off at all. We've had relatively crappy weather over the last little bit. Plus, the windshield wiper is tucked up way up here, so it's out of the way. It gives the vehicle a clean look. Plus with the trailer hitch at the back, you don't actually see any of it. They do have a power trunk. We would really be surprised if that wasn't on a luxury segment vehicle. And again, most people will have more room in here than they do in their current compact luxury sedans, something like the ATS. So sizing is good back here. I find the proportions are good, especially on the inside. So let's jump in there now so we can talk about it, and then we'll take it on a road test. You know what? I do dig the interior of this car. It is different from some of the German luxury cars that we featured, but I think it's functional. I think it works for buyers who are looking at Cadillac products. Now, first of all, the seats up here are very comfortable, especially for a compact vehicle. They're really good. Heat and ventilation for the front, as well as a single profile massage function, something we don't usually find in this segment. Rear seat space is good with good legroom. You also have outboard heated seats and vents with USB chargers. There is no third zone for the climate control. It is just a regular dual zone auto system up front. But let's talk about some of the tech. Color head-up display. It's a little bit smaller than we saw on something like the GMC Sierra. You also have Cadillac's rear video monitor. It isn't a good resolution. It is more like a potato camera from what I've experienced. The quality isn't quite there, but again, we're looking at a compact vehicle, so the fact that it exists is good enough. But you do have controls like we saw in the GMC Sierra to be able to change the zoom and angle of it. It's just the overall image quality is lower, again, based on the price point. Cadillac's user experience, or now just Q, doesn't stand for anything, is the one thing that might throw some buyers off. It is angled quite upwards, and I know a lot of people complain about the tablet style displays. This one is actually a tablet built into the dashboard, so it might be a good mix for people who aren't totally interested in something protruding. However, I find it is angled quite high up. It does give you actually good angle, but you're taking your eyes off the road more with a setup like this. You have everything that you need: navigation, Sirius XM radio, Apple CarPlay, and Android Auto, as well as 4G LTE, plus a surround view HD camera system, which works very well. Aside from that, this car does have most of the other luxury stuff you'd expect: HomeLink, the panoramic sunroof, a black headliner, which is nice. The leatherette dashboard with door cards comes on the Sport trim. And, the carbon weave interior trim could be replaced with wood if you wanted it. They're going for a bit of a sportier design with this particular press model, but for the most part, everything works. I do like the steering wheel. I do like the comfort, the space, the visibility on this is good. And like I said, most people are looking at this. They're probably going to be upgrading from something like the Cadillac ATS or even the CTS, and I think they're going to feel quite at home when it comes to the interior here. But now let's take it on a road test and see how this vehicle performs on the road, and if it could be the compact crossover luxury vehicle for you. Now, we did a breathing exercise at the beginning of the video. I wanted you guys to kind of reset yourselves after all of the BMW stuff that we've been doing recently here on Test Drive. But I still want you to sort of clear your mind, which is the way that I approach any new vehicle that we're doing on this show. Try to get rid of any of the preconceived biases that you might have. Because again, this isn't meant to be a performance-oriented car. I know that this is the Sport trim, so obviously Cadillac is shooting themselves in the foot a little bit by not actually giving it a sporty engine. But again, let's kind of forget that it's trying to be anything other than a really comfortable, compact vehicle. Now, first of all, this car has the adaptive Sport suspension. It is a $1,325 option from Cadillac, and it is very similar to what we saw on the Buick LaCrosse and even the GMC Sierra Denali. It does give you better ride control. It says that it's testing the road every 2 milliseconds and essentially using continuous dampening to make sure that the ride is as comfortable and as smooth as possible. And I have to say that it works. In fact, I drove this back to back with another vehicle that we're featuring here on Test Drive, and you can notice that it is a smooth ride. It's not the smoothest, and it's something that you get with a longer wheelbase vehicle, but it's really good. Going over some of these bumps, you don't feel it as much. I'm really comfortable in it, and I think that's what Cadillac is going for with this vehicle. I know, again, that they've called this trim the Sport. It's not super sporty. I know the outside look kind of has, as they say, some of the V-inspired trim to it, but the point of this vehicle is to be comfortable, and it certainly is, especially with these seats as well. You put on the massage, and you're in business for a compact crossover. It's really good. but people will still wonder about the engine. Now, to be fair, I've been driving it mostly highway based. It does a good job. I don't have any issues getting up to speed. I've kept it in touring mode, which essentially uses the twin clutch all-wheel drive system and decouples the rear wheels, so you're really running on front wheel drive all the time. You can lock it into all-wheel drive mode or tell it to be an all-wheel drive mode, and then there's a sport mode as well. But I've been pretty happy in the two-wheel drive mode. The weather here surprisingly has been nice, so we haven't had to worry too much about needing all-wheel drive. But again, you have that option there if you want. There aren't a lot of vehicles out there that allow you to switch between essentially two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive that aren't proper SUVs, and it seems like Cadillac likes to do it. We saw that with the XT5 that we featured a little earlier on. Now, one of the other things Cadillac says they've done with this vehicle is they've added an electro-hydraulic brake system instead of the old vacuum-style system that most cars would use. They say that it helps to reduce some of the engine compartment space, so you have more space in there, and overall fuel efficiency as well. I mean, I couldn't tell you. We're doing 75 kilometers an hour right now. Holy crap! Okay, well, I mean, that works. It wasn't quite an emergency brake, but pretty darn close to it. But my God, like it definitely picked up and stopped for you there. So maybe that's part of it. They say that it helps. Now, I know I said this isn't really a performance-oriented vehicle, and it's true, but I know that you guys appreciate it when we do try to do some of the sport testing. So I've put the car into sport mode. We do have the manual shift mode on. You basically pull the shifter down again. You do have paddle shifters with the 9-speed automatic transmission here. So we'll go. There's no launch controller we're going to be using, just straight off. Not blistering there. I'm going to shift around 5, and it's a little slow at shifting. And even there, like, I'm clicking the paddles and okay, we're at 100. So I don't know, like 6 seconds roughly. I think it should be around 6.5 probably. Most people are going to be driving this in the manual shift mode. Probably most people aren't even going to keep it into sport mode. Again, I haven't driven it in it. I've kept it in touring mode, so we'll go back into front wheel drive, which is all I need at this time because fuel efficiency is decent with a vehicle like this. I'd like to keep it that way because that's the type of buyer that's looking at this. Again, they're not performance oriented. I know that the sport look on the front kind of makes this a little bit more oriented towards the enthusiasts, but you got to remember, and sometimes we kind of forget that not every single car is designed for enthusiasts. And I know we can kind of forget that. We think, well, geez, every car should appeal to the die-hard gearhead, but there aren't a lot of them out there like that. And this is certainly one that appeals to people who are interested, again, in comfort, style. You know, I mean, it looks a lot like the other Cadillac crossovers and vehicles in their lineup. It's not a bad looking car. It doesn't have anything really overly negative. And that's one problem I think we're going to have when we kind of wrap everything up is, you know, what is negative to talk about this car? It does what it's supposed to. It's priced reasonably well. Has massaging seats, which is a huge plus. The backup camera system. The rear view camera system is good too. It's not a whole lot to complain about. It's likely not the vehicle for you or me, and most enthusiasts will probably skip this. But I still think for a lot of people, the Cadillac XT4 will be their first choice. You know what? I really enjoyed driving the 2019 Cadillac XT4 Sport this week, and I'm not ashamed about that. Sure, it doesn't protrude sportiness the same way that the BMW X4 M40i did last week, but then again, it's not meant to. The XT4 fills a spot in Cadillac's crossover lineup that's either been going to Buicks or the larger XT5. So let's talk numbers. The XT4 did 8.2 liters per 100 kilometers, or around 28.5 US miles per gallon on our 100 kilometer test loop, and 10.3 liters per 100 kilometers, or around 23 mpg during our entire week with it. We did our test loop drive in touring mode, which decoupled the rear wheels from the all-wheel drive system and ran the vehicle in front-wheel drive only mode. On to our likes and dislikes. Overall, the styling of the XT4 is attractive, getting a lot of styling cues from the 2019 facelift of the CT6 that we'll be featuring in a couple weeks. Interior comfort was also excellent, especially with the massaging front seats, which is a feature we haven't found on another compact luxury crossover at this time. The 360-degree camera system was sharp and highly detailed, and I'm happy to finally drive a vehicle from GM that isn't an Escalade that allows me to fit my iPhone 8 Plus in the wireless charging pad. Now, I mentioned at the end of our driving segment that I would have trouble finding something to dislike about this vehicle. Again, remember this isn't your Mercedes-AMG GLC 43 competitor, and Cadillac seems to have done its market research to understand what its buyers want, not necessarily what BMW and Audi drivers want. With that in mind, I only had two major complaints. The rear-view camera quality was quite poor, whether it was the actual sensor on the camera or the resolution of the monitor. It was noticeably bad. I mentioned it was the only luxury segment system we've tested in the compact crossover market, but it's important to note that consumer brands like Subaru, Nissan, and Infiniti are adding this type of rear-view camera to their vehicles. So we'd like to have seen the same high-def camera from the pickup trucks we just featured from GM. And the second major complaint is the Q infotainment system. It's angled dramatically high up, and while I'm 6 foot tall and was looking down at it, a shorter driver might find the angle to be an annoyance. I get that it's hard to incorporate everything into a single design or platform, but it is something to note about the interior that just wasn't a hit for us. Aside from that though, I expect to see more XT4s on the road now that dealers are getting more inventory. This is an incredibly important segment for Cadillac to be in, and its success with the XT4 is crucial for the success of the brand. As GM phases out most of their sedans, including all the sedans under the Cadillac banner, vehicles like the XT4 need to be a hit with customers.